You for joining us today and welcome. 2 years ago, when we were preparing for the 2019 SID annual conference, we sent out a survey about what our participants wanted from a SID Washington conference. In addition to cutting edge development topics, there was also a desire for some learning or skill to be conveyed, and hence learning labs were born. Now, I have to tell you, this particular learning lab is unique. You can come here now and then go tomorrow to the authors panel, where you will see 4 examples of international development memoirs and learn about why and how they were written. A matter of fact, they will be moderated by your learned teacher here today, Lee Gutkind. Now, this all came about because 2 years ago, I met Lee Gutkind. I was lucky enough to have Professor Gutkind in a graduate course on creative nonfiction, and it was truly remarkable. In that course, there were many real writers, and then me. I was blown away. So if you are serious about writing after this tempting intro into the Learning Lab, find Lee at Arizona State University or wherever you can. Now let me introduce Lee. Vanity Fair called Lee Gutkind the godfather behind creative nonfiction. He is the author or editor of more than 30 books, and he has just written his memoir, My Last 8,000 Days, an American Male in His 70s. Additionally, Lee is founder and editor of Creative Nonfiction, the first and largest literary magazine to publish narrative nonfiction exclusively. He has lectured to audiences around the world and appeared on many national radio and television shows, including The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Good Morning America, National Public Radio's Talk of the Nation, and All Things Considered, as well as BBC World. As I mentioned, Lee is Distinguished Writer in Resident in the Consortium for Science, Policy, and Outcomes at Arizona State University, as well as a professor in the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. For those who may want to write in the future, I highly recommend his book entitled, You Can't Make This Stuff Up, The Complete Guide to Writing Creative Nonfiction, from memoir to literary journalism to everything in between. I myself have a signed copy by Lee. Well, I don't want to waste any more time, so you can learn as much from Lee as possible. Take it away, Lee.
Well, Anne is not exaggerating enough the way in which she responded as a writer. She introduces herself to you as a non-writer, but in that class, she went crazy. And she wrote and she wrote. You remember, Anne, you wrote and you wrote and you wrote. And the big problem with what Anne did was, and this is a guilt trip, she never finished. She never finished her story. And so maybe she'll take her own advice here and get back to work on and write the true story of her life, her memoir, so that we can all buy her book, make her tons of money, and read it. So anyway, nice to be here with you all today. I had a great time 2 years ago when we did our authors panel in person back then, and I was pretty impressed. So impressed that I wish that the title of this little workshop we're doing today, the title is So You Want to Write a Memoir? Well, I think the title should be something more like, I envy you guys because you ought to write a memoir, or I wish I had the experience and the background that you all have, so that because you are much more interesting than I am, and you are much more interesting than many of the memoirs that you will read on the New York Times bestseller list. So, I mean, you're the perfect people to talk to about writing memoir. And I have spent my life, yes, there is my memoir that Anne held up before, My Last 8,000 Days. It's about aging and how I responded to it. Uh, and um, and there's that. But I have for my whole life chased other people who have been fascinating and interesting and become kind of a voyeur in their lives, trying to reproduce and may turn into cinema the world of. I traveled with a crew of baseball, National League baseball umpires for a year. I I wandered around the country on a motorcycle for a few years. I spent 4 years in an organ transplant unit, and I scrubbed with and lived with transplant recipients and candidates and surgeons. So I've looked for stories all my life, and you guys have stories to tell. So I'm jealous. And I'm hoping that maybe since you've taken this little workshop, maybe you'll think about trying to do this on your own. In fact, I was thinking about this before, that SID ought to start a member memoir book series and begin to publish your work as memoir as a regular premium and of membership of the organization. So that's a thought I'll throw out to all of you people who have lots of money who can give to this idea. So let me go back and give you a few examples, and let me just explain to you what we're dealing with, what this world of memoir or nonfiction is all about. First with, and I'm going to talk for a little while, not too long. I can talk for a long time if you want. As you can see right away, I go on, and I can do that. And I will if you force me to. But my idea is that I'm going to just tell you a few things about memoir, get you excited about it, tell you a few things about writing, and then open it up to questions. And I'll answer any question. Maybe you'll have questions about writing, and maybe you'll have questions about publishing. But whatever, I'm here for 50 minutes in total. I've used up some of that time already, I know. But a memoir basically is a deep dive into yourself. What you know, what you think, what you have experienced. But it's under the umbrella in the writing world of what people call creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction is pretty much, true stories. And it's two words, creative nonfiction, style and substance. So the substance is your story or your experience, what you have learned, what you want to impart upon your own general research. You have to say, there ought to be something that you're saying and communicating and teaching to your readers. So that's kind of the nonfiction or the substance part. The word creative means how do you present? How do you present this information, these ideas, these feelings, and these thoughts to a general audience? And you do it creatively, and you do it using narrative, and you do it using story. So as you sit down and begin to think about writing your own story, your own memoir, yes, think about all the stuff you want to tell people about your travels and your experiences, but also at the same time, think about how you are going to tell them. What story do I have that will allow me to include information that's really important about my life and about what I have learned to my readers? The thing is about story is that, and there's been tons of scientific information about story, scientific research. People remember facts much longer when those facts are communicated in a story rather than you just telling them straight out. And people are much more easily persuaded by what you want to say when what you want to say is cast, your point of view is cast in a story-oriented way. So you're always thinking the big challenge is not what you know, but how how you are going to present what you know to the people you want to read your work. to want to read your work and about your life. A couple of other things, words. You know what a biography is. A biography is when you write the story of somebody else's life, okay? An autobiography is when you write the story of your own life. And that's usually the whole scope of your life. I was born in Iowa. I was raised in Texas. I went to Tanzania to do some work, whatever, however it is you want to say, but it's usually some sort of a chronology, your entire life captured in an autobiography. Maybe the most famous and long autobiography is the biography of Henry Adams. Some of you might have read it when you were in college, and he starts when he was 2 years old and he goes until he dies. So almost, and so that's an autobiography. A memoir is something else. A memoir focuses on one aspect of your life that you found most memorable, most dramatic, most telling of what happened to you in the world as you experienced the world. And a memoir is not just information. A memoir is a deep dive in yourself. A memoir sometimes is very personal, whereas the autobiography is not just that personal. In a memoir, sometimes I think, as I was writing mine, sometimes I thought I was sitting on the couch of a shrink somewhere and confessing everything that I thought or remembered or should have done or might have done or imagined I might have done. But it all focuses on one aspect of your life rather than the entire scope of your life. And so that's a real challenge to figure out how you're going to do that, and what really. I'll talk a little bit about how you get there in a little while, but sit back, think about your life, and think about what most impressed and impacted you, and try to visualize that, and try to make that come alive, and remember that may well be the theme that you follow from the absolute beginning of your story till the end. This doesn't mean when you focus on one aspect. In my memoir, I focus on aging. What happened to me it begins on the day I turned 70, and the conflict and trauma that I faced on that particular day for lots of reasons. And I go through a good deal of my own life. Some stuff I just mentioned to you, like being in an organ transplant unit, or interacting with Major League Baseball players and umpires, or motorcycles. But it all kind of relates to aging. There is what we call a focus. It's a story that is sooner or later always coming back to the focus of whatever it is you're writing about. So think about that, and think about the fact that you want to try to be as honest as possible, not give away, not complain, not whine, but try to be as honest as possible to your readers about your experiences. This is why they will read memoir. They will read your memoir because you are giving them your own personal insight into something they might have been able to read in a magazine or a newspaper. But the memoir gives you the opportunity to go back in time and recreate what it is you have been thinking about, you had been thinking about, what it is you might have done if you had more choices, what it is the government or the world could have done in any particular case. You're just kind of telling your readers, a general readership audience, you're telling your readers recreating for your readers the experiences you had, what you thought about in every way possible. So, as I say, it is very it's very personal and informational. One of my favorite memoirs that you may well have read is Dreams of My Father by Barack Obama. And that is both informational and incredibly moving and intimate. And intimate is, in fact, the right word. Um, um, and sometimes we get scared of being so intimate, figuring out what our writers, what our readers might even be embarrassed about, or what we wouldn't want, even though we think it, and even though we feel it. There may well be certain things that that in the end you might not want to share with your readers. The idea of writing a memoir is to open yourself up and write as explosively and expansively as you can. And then after it is on paper, after it is on your computer display, you can always take it out. So one tries to write a memoir it's as expansively as possible, and then start to worry about who might be offended or who might be embarrassed, and you kind of think about or who might get in trouble. You kind of think about what to take out after you've put it all in. After you put it all in, sometimes you read it. Sometimes as you're writing it, and you say, boy, should I put this in? Or maybe I shouldn't have done this. But then you read it and you think, well, this is not too bad. So so be as open as you possibly can with yourself, and move forward, and try to write the span of your life in a story. As I said, it's very personal, and sometimes people wonder if you'll be believable. In nonfiction, in journalism, there are quotes, there are fact checkers, there are all kinds of people around to try to make you make you be as accurate and truthful as possible. In memoir, you are truthful as possible, but the truth is yours and not anybody else's. And so you don't have to worry about carrying around the tape recorder through the entire life and making sure that all the things, all the dialogue that you recreate is totally accurate. People know, your readers know, because you have written a memoir, that you are recalling conversations and memories and ideas that you have retained in your own mind. And it may well be very different than memories and ideas and conversations that people in the same room experiencing the same thing may well relive it and see it and remember it differently. This is okay. This is what happens in our real life. We have a conversation with someone about someone else, and we describe that conversation, and the person that we're telling this story to understands that it's what you remember, and maybe not completely accurately what happened. And so don't be afraid of recreating conversations and trying to figure out what you remembered during that particular time. This is okay. The memoir gives you this scope of imagination because of your memory to recreate what you imagine or what you remember really happened. So, so don't be worried about that. Don't be worried about, of course, you're going to be fact checked. You can't say that Kenya is in the United States. You won't get away with that. But you will get away with recreating your story in the way you vividly remember it. And remember that that's why people will be reading you, or one of the reasons. Your inside take and knowledge of what memoir is and what your life has been all about. Let me see if there's anything else that I want to talk about. Yeah. Let me go to a couple of slides I have for you before we open this up to questions. Hey, Ian, could you do the first slide? So how am I going to write my memoir? Okay. It's not like writing a paper for class or even writing a research paper. Memoir is memory, and you remember things slowly and carefully. And so, so my strong suggestion for those of you who want to start to work on a full-length memoir book, or even a shorter personal essay about your lives, is to kind of try to establish a regular schedule. Not necessarily work 8 hours a day, 1 day a week, but if you could just do an hour and a half, 4 or 5 days a week, that will work much better for you. Here we have Ernest Hemingway. I know you've heard of him. The important thing is to have good water. Writers are like wells. The important thing is to have good water in the well. And it's much better to take a regular amount out than to pump the well dry and wait for it to refill. And so that's true. And so even though you may well start that Tuesday at midnight and decide to write for an hour. And even though you're going like crazy, maybe you want to kind of stop before you run out of steam and run out of gas, and just let it hang there for the next day. But you've got your hour in, or your 2 hours in, and you can come back energized the day after that when you go back to work, and pick it up where you left off. Hemingway was interesting. When he wrote, of course, this is quite a while ago, but he wrote on an old manual typewriter, and he spaced out, he put 5 spaces between each of his words, so that he went slower and thought more carefully about the words and the sentences he was writing. And sometimes he would retype the following day what he wrote the day before, just to get him back into the spirit of the story he was telling. And when you do that, sometimes I do that a lot. I often go back to my beginning, and what happens is 2 things happen when you do that. One thing that happens is that if you go back to the beginning, you are reviewing what you have written, and you will invariably think of other things that you might have forgotten to include. And so you may never get to the end, or the end of that sequence, but you'll be filling in stories and ideas that you started. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is that when you're working and you start before you had ended before, you build up a momentum. And sometimes you can just kind of move so seamlessly through what you wrote yesterday, connecting to what you wrote today, and or what you want to write today. And so my advice is that if you're going to do this, and this is going to be really hard, and it's going to take time for you to establish a schedule, but try to do it around about the same time every single day for around about that same time period, and put together and put together a page or 2, and always try to leave when you know where you're going to go the next day. And then start again the next day. Gee whiz, if you produced a page a day, if you worked an hour every single day, and you produced a page a day, and you only worked 5 days a week, at the end of the year, you would have a book-length manuscript. So I'm not saying it'd be perfect, and I'm not saying it would be totally publishable at that point, but then you would have something really significant to work with. So think about that. And I want you to also think about and remember that we memoirists, we creative nonfictionists, write in story. And we're always looking to kind of find and recreate a scene that helps us lead our reader into the depth of our book and also communicate ideas and information at the same time. And so when you sit down and write, try to be as cinematic as possible. Don't just say, today I'm going to write about what happened to me last week in wherever. Try to every day recreate another scene like a movie. It's like you're recreating a movie. It's like every day I sit down, a movie has maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 scenes. And every single day I sit down, I'm going to sit down and write a little story, write a little scene. Because it's going to because those little scenes are all going to come together in my bigger book someday. And remember, it's the story and the scene that sells the book, not necessarily all the information you can provide. So I'm going to, I always look for, it's what I call magic moments. I always look to kind of remember the magic moments and recreate those magic moments, even though they may not connect to the next magic moment, but they will connect sooner or later, and they will be those magic moments or those scenes will be the engine that allows you to communicate your ideas and your information and teach your readers some stuff. So, hey, Ian, can I have the next slide? Here's a great example. This is from a memoir by Cheryl Strayed. It was made into a movie. It's a best-selling book, but it's just a magic moment that introduces so much of what this book was all about. The trees were tall, but I was taller, standing above them on a steep mountain slope in Northern California. Moments before, I'd removed my hiking boots and the left one had fallen into those trees, first catapulting into the air when my enormous backpack toppled onto it, and then skittering across the gravelly trail and flying over the edge. It bounced off a rocky outcropping several feet beneath me before disappearing into the forest canopy below. Impossible to retrieve. I let out a stunned gasp, although I'd been in the wilderness 38 days, and by then I'd come to know that anything could happen and that everything would. But that doesn't mean I wasn't shocked when I did it. My boot was gone. Actually gone. So that's the way Cheryl Strayed started. That's the first two paragraphs, a one-sentence paragraph and a bigger one, started her book. A magic moment, a scene that represented lots of what that gave her the opportunity to talk a lot about her voyage, her odyssey into the Pacific Coast Trail. And we learn as she goes back in time. She never tells us. She never tells us until the middle of the book whatever happened to that boot. So you get the reader thinking about it right away, thinking about chapter after chapter and thinking about whatever happened to that boot. How can she do this? Well, she set us up really nicely with this scene. And so we wonder for half the book how she really got on without a hiking boot in this really primitive kind of trail. And so she goes back in time. She tells us about heroin addiction. She tells us about her mom's cancer. She tells us all this stuff. And in stories like this, and in the meantime, we're wondering whatever happened to that boot. And so this was a magic moment that she that she recreated for us and for her readers. And it's really a lovely little paragraph, and it really takes you into her story quite nicely. Let's go to the next one. This is a little different, but I love this. Some of you have maybe have read Scott Kelly's memoir of his year in space. In the darkness, I get turned around and upside down. I can see only what's immediately in front of my face, like a scuba diver in murky waters, and it's completely disorienting. Everything looks familiar in the dark. I start to head in a direction I think is the right one, but then I realize it's wrong, but I can't tell whether I'm upside down or right side up. I read some mile markers, numbers attached to the handrails, to Megan in Mission Control, hoping she can help tell me where I am. It looks much different in the dark, I tell Megan. Roger that, she says. Did I not go far enough aft? I ask. Let me go back to my safety tether. I figure once I find the place where my tether's attached, I'll be able to get my bearings. We're working on queuing up the sun for you, Megan jokes, but it's going to be another 5 minutes. I look in the direction I think is Earth, hoping to catch a glimpse of some city lights 250 miles below in the darkness to get my bearings. If I just knew which way Earth is, I could figure out where I am on the truss. When I look around, all I see is black. So, a magic moment that does in fact, if you've read the book, give Scott Kelly the opportunity to fill in some of the blanks and teach his readers, tell his readers all kinds of things that they might want to know about what it's like to be in space, in the dark, in a capsule, or communicating to Mission Control, or what is happening in Mission Control as he is floating through space. It's the story that allows the writer to get the reader interested enough to learn the information behind the cinema, behind the drama. And so 2 magic moments. I think, Ian, I won't go to the third one because it is now, I've used up much more time than I said I was going to use. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not sorry. I'm happy to have talked to you about it. I have a real passion for this kind of writing, to recreate in my head and then on paper or on a computer display the stuff that the stuff that impacted me in my life is incredibly exciting. And I get up every morning and I think about doing this, and I think about how to turn my life into a movie and also inform people who wouldn't necessarily know about the subject I'm dealing with, whether it be baseball umpires or whether it be organ transplant surgery, or whether it would be the plight of children confronted with mental illness, or whether it will be about my own life and how I adjusted to the trauma, or what was to me trauma of aging. And so now, Anne, it is, I have some more time. I have some time for questions. I'm sorry. I'm kind of sorry I went along this long, but okay, here we are. We got this time left. So ask away, please.
Thank you, Lee. And I just want to say, I'm only at chapter 7 in your book, but being slightly grown up myself, I felt the angst of aging and felt like your words represented many folks' feelings when you were doing that. So let me just go to a couple questions that we have here. We have, sorry, I just lost it. Matthew Hobson writes in, he says, how do you treat the other characters that are part of the story of your life. There's a degree of subjectivity even when telling a true story, and the way we experience and then portray others seems charged with ethical and artistic implications.
I don't get it. I'm sorry. I
So
wish.
I guess it's, how do you deal with the other people? I mean, how do you describe them? I mean, you know,
How do you describe them?
do you feel like you want to portray them objectively? Is there any subjectivity in it? I mean, do you get a little nervous when you write about like your family, your father, I mean, in your book or whatever? No, you're pretty brutally honest.
Okay. Yeah. So look, it's not as if you're going to make a lot of friends writing a memoir. Okay. And I think people expect you to be as, I say this loosely, brutally honest as you can be. That is to say, to be as honest as you can be about the people about whom you are writing. If you whitewash a character, your reader is you're gonna lose some credibility. If you smash a reader or a character meanly and viciously, you're probably going to make your readers feel that this memoir is a tactic of revenge. I think that you need to look at your characters, at the way you look at them in life, and try to portray them as honestly as you possibly. This is your story. The memoir is your story. It's your book. And so your reader is going to expect honesty. And if you have mixed feelings about the people, whether it's your former supervisor or a college professor, it doesn't really matter. If you have mixed feelings, then just say so to your readers. It's not as if readers don't have mixed feelings about people. They all do. Your readers are just like you. Your readers have their own lives to try to recreate. I don't see any ethical challenges in telling the truth and being honest. You certainly don't want to use libel or in any way be dishonest and about the people you're writing about. I often, not always, but I often in my books generally tell the people I'm writing about them, and even sometimes tell them what I said. That doesn't mean they're going to particularly like it, but and maybe they do. And maybe sometimes it's really interesting that you tell someone about what you're writing about them, and they tell you even more, or they go another degree to confess a little bit more and fill in some blanks. So you can dialogue with the people you're writing about, and there are very, very, very few lawsuits about people who filed by characters in a memoir who have been upset by a memoir. There's one of my favorite memoirs is called "The Kiss" by Catherine Harrison, and it's all about how she was between the ages of 18 and 20 when she had an affair with her Presbyterian minister father. And lots of characters are portrayed. Catherine's children, Catherine's husband, her father's children and wife. And people are embarrassed and upset, but she told the real truth. And she told her story as she experienced it, which would be much different than the way in which her dad experienced it. No lawsuits, but you got to be brave. I can't remember, Philip Roth, I think, but I'm not sure, once said, a writer who writes, and I'm paraphrasing, a writer who writes, when a writer writes about his family, that family is ruined. And maybe it's not really that harsh, but one needs to be careful, and one needs to be honest, and a writer needs to know that it's your honesty, your carefulness, but also your honesty that's going to make your memoir shine.
So I have a follow-up question. I have actually two more questions. I want to fit them both in before we're done. But Fekadu says, I'm actually in the process of writing a memoir whose target audience is only my family members. I'm not quite sure to name it a memoir, even though it contains almost everything. Any thought?
What's in a name? I mean, if you don't want to call it a memoir, don't. Call it my story, my life. And if, of course, if you're only writing for your family and nobody else, then I don't know why you're doing that. I do wonder why there are people who write stories just for their family, and that's nice, kind of a legacy. But just for your family, it doesn't matter what you call it. Call it a memoir. It's a good word.
And if you write that memoir under a pen name, a questioner asked, does it turn it into fiction?
Yeah. What memoir? Yeah. Well, it doesn't turn it into fiction. It just turns you into fiction. So, why would you do that? If a big challenge is a big challenge in dealing with the characters you're writing about. Sometimes people change names, change locations, and sometimes people, in order not to embarrass someone, or in order to avoid litigation, imagined litigation of one sort or another. Okay, and I get that, but the more you change, the less credibility you have as a memoirist. The fact that it's true, or as true as you remember it, is what makes whatever you write real and valuable and credible. And so you need to, you need to do your best to make sure that here's this phrase that I often use: there are innocent victims of memoir. People about whom you write that they don't even know you're writing about them. People who appear and get hurt by what it is you say, and so you need to be really careful about those characters kind of on the sidelines that can be hurt, like I mentioned Catherine Harrison, like her kids. Or what her kids' parents, or what her kids' friends' parents might say to her kids. You need to think more clearly about the impact and the depth of what it is you're writing. Sometimes you see in a memoir some sort of statement in the beginning that in one way absolves you of what we think is legal ramifications. Usually those statements, some of the names have been changed, some of the dates have been changed. From a legal point of view, it doesn't really help you very much at all. So you've got to be careful not to libel anyone, or not to cause them any discomfort which would cost them income or reputation. But you can certainly be honest about how you feel toward them, and be as subjective as you would like to be.
Okay, thank you, Lee, for that. I have a question from Hannah, which I think is a great question. She says, I've started writing and have subsequently paused on several different memoirs, each with a different focus over the years. I'm sure she wouldn't have done that if she'd been in your class. I pause because often I'm not sure who I'm writing for beyond myself. For focus, is it helpful to have a target audience in mind as you write? Or should you free flow and let the audience take shape as you open up and write along the way? So what do you do when you're thinking about an audience, or do you even think about it at all?
I think about everybody. I think about the fact that everybody, this doesn't happen, but I think everybody's going to be interested in me or interested in what I have to say. I like this idea and this free flow phrase. That, so let's say your memoir is published, and the average book is 75,000 words. It's not as if you sit down and you write 75,000 words and the book is over. Um, uh, the writer of memoir usually has written 375,000 words or 475,000 words in order to figure out what to keep and what to change and what to get rid of. And so I totally believe that that you shouldn't worry 1/3 of the way through or halfway through about the fact that your focus is you're losing your focus or you're going off in another direction. You got to finish. You got to go from beginning to end. You got to go to a point where where the book that you're writing is or the story you want to tell is over. And if it changes focus from time to time, well, of course it is. It's going to do that. You're going to keep thinking. You're going to keep looking at this. So to me, writing a book, especially a memoir, is incredibly exciting because every day you look at your life differently. And every day you think about your life differently. So every day you write and you learn from what you have written. And slowly but surely, the entire three-dimensional scope of your experience comes back to you and is recreated. And then you start to figure out what's really my message? What's really my focus? I can tell you again and again with my students and with myself that the focus I start out with, the points I want to make that I start out with are never, ever the points I end up with and the focus that I finally capture. I just want to write really good stuff and recreate an aspect of whatever aspect I want of my life and my observations. And that's what I strongly object or suggest that you do. And don't be in any hurry. It takes a long time to do this right. If you don't want to do this right, then dash it off in 6 months. But sometimes, one of my favorite novels, Catch-22, Joseph Heller wrote every single day at lunchtime, and it took him 12 and a half years to write that book. Not that you have 12 and a half years to mess around with, but take your time and build on it, and don't try to edit yourself too soon. Don't stop unless you think it's really terrible. The writing is terrible. Don't stop. If the focus isn't clear, then join the club.
So Lee, I'm sure that others like myself, but it's also a very selfish question. With your class, which, as you know, I loved at ASU, I think you also teach in other venues. Can you tell us if anyone would like to take your class? Do you have online classes? Do you have in-person and DC classes? Can you tell us more about, if we are writing a book or trying again, where we can find you?
Well, you can certainly find me at ASU, but the last 2 years, the last year, because of COVID, of course, I did it through Zoom, but I'll be starting, I teach a class every spring term at ASU, and I
DC.
gather.
In DC?
No. I gather I'm going back to Tempe this upcoming year. You never know. But but at this point, yes, I can recommend Creative Nonfiction, um, the Creative Nonfiction Foundation. The Creative Nonfiction Foundation publishes Creative Nonfiction Magazine, which I started a quarter of a century ago. And Creative Nonfiction has a number of really terrific classes that you can take from writers who are experienced teachers, to help you with memoir or to help you with publishing. They're inexpensive, under $400 for a series of 6 or 8 sessions. And they have 1-hour webinars, and they even have a self-guided memoir course that you could just take and follow along with. So it's www.creativenonfiction.org. Also, they have published over the years, or we have published over the years, lots of articles about creative nonfiction memoir craft. And if you're a subscriber, the entire digital history and of what we have published is available to you. So I'm not dodging not studying with me, but right now, and you might check out my website. For the past year, obviously, I haven't gone anywhere, and I'm hoping that there will be more opportunities like this one to talk to you folks live, and it'll be on my website, myname.com. So also on my website will be all different, 4 or 5 different opportunities to buy my books, so, or any of my books. So think about that. And look, when you publish your book, when your memoir is published, don't hesitate to ask for the order, okay? Don't hesitate to, it'd be great to have good reviews, and it'd be great to have former students like Anne tell you that my book is really good, even though she's only gone to chapter 8 or 7. But always try to work real hard to share what you have worked so hard to put together with others.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for sharing with us today and being on as our moderator tomorrow with some panelists, and I'm going to encourage others to go there. In closing, I also need to let folks know that the survey that they're going to get will provide your feedback at the end of the conference. We will send out a link tomorrow afternoon and through email. And it was because people actually answered the survey, what they liked, what they wanted in the future, that we actually have this learning lab. So please, we read it and we take it seriously. Additionally, join the online conversation through social media. It's hashtag SIDW, SID-W conference. And next up at noon, we have networking, the sponsor social hour exhibit hall. And there's a link in the agenda on the conference platform. So again, Lee, you know, it's like I follow you around and invite you to more things because you're the best. And we're so honored that you share your story with us. And I am so proud to have been in your class before you wrote this, My Last 8,000 Days, because I hear your voice when I read the story. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank everyone for listening to me. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers.